Okay. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Sam.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for
Good.
inviting me here this afternoon to talk to you.
Well, thank you so much. So let's get to it, shall we? I'll just ask you a series of questions using the Wheel of Fortune, and we'll just go.
I think time, that commitment to give time to your students when they need it in the way that they need it. And I think that's one of the most difficult things, because we're all busy. We've all got 101 things to do. But all supervisors, are good academically. They know how to help the student, but being able to give the student what they want when they need it is what's most important, and that takes a commitment of time. Oh, yeah, I should say, for those of you listening, Sam warned us what these questions were, and I looked at that one, and I could not think of a single paper that I've gone back to multiple times. But what I do think is that the ones that I do like, the ones that I pick up again and again from my from my hard drive, what I remember about them is not the text, but the images. So a paper that can tell its story through really well-drawn graphics, that's what captures my imagination. And very often, maybe it's because I've trained as a mathematician and not as a psychologist, and I never wrote essays, but very often I will read an abstract and then I will look at figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, figure out what's happening from those, and then go back and read the text. So that's quite a long story. So I started out as a mathematician. So I did a maths degree as an undergraduate, and I hated it. And doing 3 years of something that you hate and that you are not good at, because suddenly when you get to university level, even if you are good at a subject at school, you're suddenly surrounded by all these other people that are good at it. And not being able to do maths is really hard, because you can't do it. If you're not good at geography, you can still write a bad essay. So that was a rather demoralizing university experience for me. And so when I graduated, I ran away. I went to Hong Kong for 2 years. Went across the Trans-Siberian Railway across Eastern Europe, which really was Eastern Europe at that time, Trans-Siberian Railway. Spent 5 weeks traveling through China, and China had just opened up to the West at that point. We had the first edition of the Lonely Planet China guidebook, so that was super exciting. It was just fabulous. And then I got to Hong Kong, and I had no reason to come back to the UK. And so I found a job teaching in what they call an Anglo-Chinese secondary school. So it was from ages of 11 to 18, and they were local Cantonese-speaking children, but the medium of education was English. And so I taught them English and I taught them maths there. And I spent a fabulous 2 years in Hong Kong. And as a side note, I was talking to one of our MSc students yesterday, and she's from Hong Kong, and we were chatting about Hong Kong, and she lives along the same road that I lived in when I was in Hong Kong, and it was just wonderful. And the idea of traveling the world now seems such a long way away, but just hearing that, that we'd lived, it was long before she was born, but just that coincidence suddenly made the world seem so much smaller again, and it was a really nice touch. But coming back to the timeline, so I spent 2 years in Hong Kong, and then I didn't want to be a teacher for the rest of my life. I didn't want to live in Hong Kong particularly, but I figured out that if I came back to England, I could get funding to do a master's in statistics. And I'd got no particular interest in statistics, but I thought that would give me a year, of money to live on, to think about what I did want to do. So I did a master's degree in Sheffield, and I loved it. And it was such a wonderful surprise, having had a challenging time as an undergraduate, to just change track slightly and find something that I really enjoyed. But and then I stayed on to do a PhD, which was never on my life plan. I mean, some people, I don't know about you, but some people have known all the way through what they want to do and how they want to get there. I've never had a life plan. I've made each decision, one step at a time, what seems the best thing to do next. But it's always been, one step after another. So it's been purely, serendipity that I've ended up doing what I've done. In such a fabulous field, surrounded by wonderful people like you and all the other colleagues at the SGDP.
Wow, that is, I feel like I need to pause. That's quite a story. And so you joined the King's in '96, is that right?
Yes.
So
yes.
You from Sheffield to...
Yeah. So you want me to fill in the missing bit? Okay. So
yeah.
I did a 1-year master's and then a 3-year PhD in statistics, and that was when I started analysing genetic data.
Right.
Because previously statisticians analyse all sorts of data, and I started analysing genetic data because my supervisor, who was Chris Cannings, who sadly died 2 or 3 years ago, but he was a fantastic supervisor, and he gave me some genetic data to analyse. And one, I really enjoyed it. I just thought it was a really interesting area. And 2, talking to other people, and we also had a short lecture course on it, I realized that other people didn't get genetics. They couldn't, and this was something that I could clearly get and they couldn't. And having that sort of niche that you think, all right, that's good, I'll follow up with that. So it was purely accident that I ended up doing genetics and becoming a statistical geneticist. Okay, that's a much shorter and much duller story. I grew up in a village just outside Bedford, which, for those of you not in the UK, is about 60 miles north of London.
Right.
And it's mostly very dull,
Right.
which the 1970s were in most places. So, yeah. Yeah, it's like most things, you just get on with it, don't you?
Yeah.
I've done a couple of things. The one thing I've done is invest in Bluetooth headphones, which is wonderful, partly just psychologically, because you are no longer then, physically tied to your computer with headphones, as I was before. And it enables you, when you're in the middle of a call and listening, you can slip off to the kitchen and make a cup of tea and no one knows. So that's rather nice. And the other thing that I try to do is that now I don't have a commute, I try to spend that time doing something different. Okay. So whether it's, sitting in the garden, or chatting to my children who are teenagers, or even just doing the washing, but I try to keep that time protected from work. Yeah, so lots of different things I read. I'm currently reading Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. So she's now written 3 books about Thomas Cromwell. The third one, the Mirror and the Light, I think it's called, was on Radio 4 recently, and that's fantastic if anyone wants to listen to that. It's a very good way to catch up with it. But I'm such a slow reader that I'm still on her book 1, which was published about 10 years ago. So I will get to the third one. So I do read. I listen to podcasts, and I watch detective series on television. Don't watch anything else on television.
Right.
No news, nothing else but detective series. And we're currently in the middle of a French one called La Monte, which is the mantis, like a praying mantis, which probably gives you an idea. And that's set in it's set in Paris, and I can highly recommend it. And it's on Netflix. So the one that I'm most proud of is one that I published 20 years ago. And it's it's embarrassing. So Wise, Lanchbury and Lewis. So it's my first PhD student, Leslie Wise, and it was one of my first papers as senior author. And we developed a method for meta-analysis of linkage studies, which is what everyone's doing at the time. And this was a new method that no one had got a way to put together all these disparate results. And so it was a method that was very timely for that research period, and it got applied a lot. But it's the first methodological paper that I think I'm most proud of, and it's one that was very difficult to publish, and it ended up in a fairly low impact journal, but it got picked up. A lot of people used the method, and so it's been really well cited, and so it was a very successful, very well-known paper, but it wasn't easy to write it or to publish it at all, and sometimes, when I'm struggling and papers have got rejected for the third time, I look back at that paper and, and realize that having your paper rejected is not a barrier to success, and that persistence is what matters.
Yes, well, that's definitely a good answer. I think it's that there's no kind of, the relationship between the type of journal and the merit of the paper is often sketchy.
Yes. I thought you'd like that one.
Yeah.
I think we all do. I think everyone has a plan B, and mine is a cake shop at the moment. Just completely different. Yes, yeah. I'm open to co-chefs and investors. But yeah, I think we all need a plan B, even if it's just to compare plan A to and think, oh yeah, I'm not quite ready for that yet. But I think it's essential to have a plan B. So now, can I turn the table, Sam? Can I ask you what your plan B is?
In a way, gosh, see, you've thrown a curveball now. Okay, I've always wanted to be a writer, and in journalism, which so if I don't succeed in this game, and or I decide I've had enough, I will try to put all of my energies into becoming a writer or a journalist. So yes, although now you've said the cake shop, I'm tempted. You could call it Cathryn's Cakes, right? Or is that too obvious?
I'm open to suggestions. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
well, there you go. Maybe we'll talk. We'll talk offline.
Yeah. Excellent. Right. We'll go offline. Yeah. Chocolate brownies. I'm particularly good at.
Yeah.
So I think three things. And I'm talking specifically about PhD students here. Commitment to research, confidence to try new things, and persistence when those new things don't work out and don't go according to plan. So I think those are the three things that I've identified. And by commitment to research, I don't mean 100% commitment. I've had students of all different types. Some have been very driven and have long hours and given everything they've got to research, but others have treated the PhD like a job. They've worked 9 to 5 every day, put down their pen, turned off their computer at 5 o'clock and gone home and switched off completely. And both of those types of people and all the ones in between have made excellent students. But I don't think there is any one single way to be a good student or to do good research. I think you have to do it in the way that works for you and is sustainable. Oh, I'd think very hard about this one. I don't have any sort of key mantras, but I think the one that perhaps summarizes it best would be quality over quantity. The type of research that I do is slow, rich science. You know, it's often not the first to publish something, but we do it well and we do it right, even if it takes a little longer to get there. And that's my style of science. So this was another question that I struggled over. I tend not to put people on pedestals, but one of the people that I currently respect very much is Janine Austin, who is a psychiatric genetics counsellor at UBC, the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And she's the one that came up with this jam jar model for susceptibility to psychiatric disorders. And she fills her jars with stones, which represent your sort of inbuilt genetic susceptibility to a disorder. And then she pours on top of that the environment. And it models very nicely this idea that we all start with different levels of genetic susceptibility. And then when you add different levels of environmental stressors, that's why people become affected with a disorder or not. But the reason I would call her my intellectual hero is not just because of that, which is a great image that a lot of people find very helpful. But I think she is a very well-rounded researcher and person. So she's got great energy, she's got great passion for her work and for her patients. She still practices as a genetic counsellor, and she has great intellectual rigour. And so she's got that sort of full rounded approach to research, to her clinical commitment, but she's also very clear that life outside of work is very important to her. You know, she really does turn off her email when she goes on holiday, and I, full respect, she just seems to get it right, and I respect that very much.
Oh wow, I think she's a model to us all.
I think perhaps the one I would give is, what brings my life story up to date is that I'm now head of department at the SGDP Centre, and I have found that incredibly rewarding. And it was not a job that I had ever set out to have. And even when I became deputy head of department 3 or 4 years ago, I made it very clear to Frankie I was very happy to do the deputy, but I had no intention of becoming head of department. And so again, it was a purely sort of serendipitous. Oh, actually, I quite like this. And so when the opportunity to apply for the position came up last year, I decided to go for it, and it's been it's been an amazing experience, and I'm struggling to put it into words, but it's been an amazing experience because it's just given me the chance to work so closely with so many people at the SGDP Centre, lots of people that I didn't know about before and have really, and perhaps like you, Sam, and have really enjoyed getting to know better, and to sort of, try and move us all in the right direction, in the right way. And it's been a job that I've found really rewarding, despite the present challenges of being a department without a building at the moment, but that's fine. Our spirit shines through, and we are still the SGDP, wherever we all are based.
End of the question, but there was one emergency question which I did ask before the recording, which you had a great answer for. So, which is a question on comparing yourself with other people of different career stages or disciplines. Do you want to just repeat what you said?
So I try very hard not to compare myself to anyone, because I think that way lies misery, because you compare yourself to different people, you never live up to any of them. But what I do is I think about who I think does specific bits of our job or our role particularly well, and I use them as someone to live up to. So I would never pick a whole person and compare myself unfavorably, but I would choose who is it that chairs these meetings really well, who writes really interesting papers, who do I respect in the way that they supervise their students. And
well, that's it, Cathryn. So thank you very much for your time, and I don't know how to sign off, actually. How do I...
My pleasure, Sam. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the very insightful question.